let's get started, Brad, because I think there's a few things we want to just touch base on. So thank you. Welcome to, and this is being recorded, so this will be available for those that missed the session. I'm Ian McLean, President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce, joined by Brad Dunbar, and he's on our board of directors and a CA, and is going to serve as our expert today on answering any questions and having a discussion around the things that are changing as it relates to our business cash flow support programs, such as we have. Maybe Brad, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you taking that time out of your busy schedule, especially since it's getting towards tax time, and that, as we know, is probably a busy time for you. So, but thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, no worries.
Maybe let's start. There was some guidance this week, and this is something that's come up on these sessions repeatedly for quite a number of weeks, actually. And Art's listening in from my office. We've had a lot of our businesses on this Ask the Experts program. The calls that I have on a couple of times a week with Ottawa from business associations around guidance around the wage subsidy program for, I guess it's May and June, April, May and June. Maybe give a bit of an update on what has come out from CRA this week.
Yeah, so just yesterday they announced kind of their guidelines on what they're going to be doing for periods 14, 15, and 16. So we always kind of knew, what they were going to do for everything up until the February period, which is period 13. But I guess the biggest question is, how are you going to start comparing, when you get into March? Because now you're comparing, a COVID March 2020 versus a COVID March 2021. A lot of people didn't see how that would be fair, and the government definitely agreed with that. So basically the guidance that they came out has said that, you're still going to be able to use your 2019 revenue. So starting for period 14, the March, you'll be comparing March 2021 versus March 2019. I'm sure they're going to give an update on maybe another alternative way to calculate it, because we always had the, compared to Jan, Feb 2020. So whether or not it'll still be that, or if they'll come up with another way just to make sure it's still inclusive for, a lot of people, because, if you opened your business in 2020, you might have gotten it because you had revenue in January and February. But now if they only let you compare March of 2021 to March of 2019, now you're not eligible for it. So like I said, I'm expecting there to be another form of calculation, but they haven't released anything on that. So probably hear more about that in the next few weeks.
Okay. Well, I think that's important because, for many businesses, doing the planning of whether they're going to bring people back as things are slowly reopening, this was a big part of their calculation of whether they were going to have this wage subsidy program to help assist, particularly since many businesses still have a big revenue drop as a result of the lockdowns, and we're in a tough part of the year anyway. So it's very helpful. And so periods 14, 15, 16 really are April, May, and June. March, April, May.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Another thing that maybe I think I've had a number of questions this week, over the last several weeks, but this week, and Greg has as well, the questions come up on this on our sessions before, as it relates to the Canada Emergency Benefit or Loan Program, the CEBA program. Number of folks who got the first 40,000 and were approved and got that through their financial institution, but it's still approved through Ottawa. Have been saying, hey, they haven't been able to access the next 20,000, which was announced in the economic update or the last legislation, which was maybe December, Art, something like that. It was
I think it was in the throne speech, but it took about 2 or 3 months. I think it was December before it became effective.
So I think in December they went from the 40,000 loan that a business could access up to 60,000. But there's been some confusion with folks that got the first 40,000, Brad, but haven't been able to access the second tranche, which is 20,000. And I think some of the confusion is folks got the first 40,000, may have left it as a line of credit with their financial institution, but haven't drawn fully on it. And so they're being denied the next 20,000. So maybe, I don't know if that's written right into the criteria. What's your line of sight on that program? And are you hearing the same thing from your clients?
So it's, a very case by case basis. Every bank kind of implements this a different way. So, I think TD and BMO, off the top of my head, basically, if you applied for it, they put the amount fully into your bank account. So you kind of didn't have a choice. It just got put there, and they still haven't even issued any guidance on how they want you to repay it. I know RBC, for the most part, set it up as a line of credit where you had to draw against it. As for people being denied, I haven't heard too many. A lot of the times, our advice for clients has been, the guidelines for the 40 were very broad. So, there was a specific criteria you had to meet, and then they just wanted to make sure that you were using the 40 to pay off, operating expenses. The guidance for this 20 has been a lot different, and there is actually an attestation that you signed with your bank, and you might not even know that you signed it. And the line is that you still have to be financially impacted in a negative way from COVID. Now, there's no guidelines on what they're determining is the negative financial impact.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one concern we've been, trying to bring to the attention of clients, especially, some clients who, might have done well the last, few years and, have a good cash balance in their bank account. So they're able to, float themselves through these hard times, but they're still negatively impacted. So, is EDC going to look at that and say, hey, you'd actually didn't need the loan, so we're not going to grant you it? Or are they going to say, well, yeah, your revenue is down, so even though you had money to float you, we're still going to give you the grant. So there's a lot of, I guess, uncertainty still with this 20,000.
Yeah.
The other thing too is when the 40,000 originally was announced, especially for banks like RBC, you actually had to withdraw it from your line of credit by December 31st. Now that it's been extended, so you can still apply for the 40,000 up until March 31st, as well as the 20,000. But they haven't released any guidance on whether or not they're extending the spending guideline for that first 40,000 to March 31st, which you would assume they would, see how you could still apply for it today, but there's no way you would have used those funds to pay for, things in December. So there's.
I think one of the things we're hearing, and again, this is other business organizations and, with some of these guidelines, because it is different for each institution, is, some of the guidance is you may need it is if it's a line of credit or it's in your account is to fully draw on it, even if you're putting it somewhere else, because you've got expenses coming up, or that some of your staff are coming back, et cetera, because it was pretty wide open for the first 40. And the second 20 and the attestation that you're still been impacted, it's same thing as to get that extra 20, you need to have fully drawn on the first. Good afternoon, Gregory. To draw on that first 40. So that's one of the things we've been hearing is to fully draw on the first 40, whether it's a line of credit or out of your bank account, even if it's not fully utilized. So that, because that's one of the hiccups that we hear when they're not getting access to that next 20,000 in SEBA. Is it because the criteria have changed? And it's good to note, I had sort of lost sight of that. For anyone that listening in that hasn't drawn on that first 40,000, you can apply. I think you said, Brad, up to March 31st of this year for that. Well, for both chunks, but certainly for the first 40 as well as the additional 20.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe we were talking about.
Have we got any clarification yet or certainty as to whether or not what portion of that might be an additional forgiven amount, Ian?
No, well, they've said that out of the first 40, 10 is forgivable. The next 20, 10 is forgivable again. So out of the total of 60, it's 20. We're hearing, and I don't know, Brad, if you're hearing from, in your circles, that there's already a move afoot to increase that more, right? That would be something that the government is increasing that forgivable amount, which is kind of the reason why I'm saying you should fully take advantage of that program, because that might be an easy way for government to say, to make some additional benefit to particularly small business that are utilizing those types of loans, that they can clean up people's balance sheet by increasing that another 5,000 or 10,000, which makes it effectively a grant, right? Which lowers the balance sheet. It hasn't been announced yet, and I'm not sure of it. That's the rumor going around. Have you heard anything around that, Brad?
I haven't. The one thing I have heard, and especially around tax circles, is that the caution is that it's, especially for the 10,000 on that the original 40, it's an all or nothing kind of thing. So if you had repaid 29,000 instead of the 30,000, it's not like they're going to give you a $9,000 grant or prorate it. It's either you pay back the 30 and you get 10 granted, or you don't get anything. So
yeah, and we're hearing rumblings that that in lieu of increasing the programs or trying to adjust the programs or add more programs, because of the uptake of the SEBA program, they're looking at just simply saying, well, the forgivable amount will be greater. In fact, the one commentary we had was they were gonna forgive it all, but I'm not quite sure they'll go quite that far. But but there is some indication that they're going to utilize that as a further stimulus or assistance program.
Well, I think that's why it's important for people to take advantage of that one. While it's a loan, at least a portion of it's forgivable. And this may be coming to, we might want to weigh in, Brad, with what they've had to do with the CERB program, where they've had to, for those, because the guidance wasn't clear on who could get it, and lots of people were going to have to repay it, and they've just, I think the government has announced that they are making that forgivable. That's on the personal side for individuals, and I think they will get some pressure for there to be some additional forgivable amount for business as well.
Oh, I'm sure there will be. The whole thing is all these programs were, basically rolled out as fast as you possibly could do it. And, necessity dictated so. But there was a lot of oversight on both of these programs. So, at least, with the CERB program, they admitted their mistakes with that. And, we had quite a lot of phone calls when those first 400,000 letters came through, stating that, they were told by the CRA that it was, gross, not net, and, a lot of antsy people. So there's a lot of people that were, relieved when they heard the government come out and say that, they'll, as long as you have the 5,000 gross, that they won't come after you for the repayment. But as for these loans, like the biggest thing to also, I guess talk about is that, they're run by two different programs, right? Like, CERB and stuff, SUS, all those are run by CRA, where, this loan program is not. It's run by EDC and through the banks. So, will that have an impact on whether or not they, start adjusting things and forgiving things? I don't know, but it's, we should note that they're not the same program or not the same administrators of the program. So
yeah, and I think the other important thing to remember is that even the 10,000 forgivable on the 40 and the 10 on the other 20 will be considered revenue to the business. And so if they forgive more, it just means there's going to be an adjustment down the road, because that'll have to be considered as revenue to the business as well.
And the other thing too, for people who are tuning in, is that it is revenue in 2020 if you got the loan in 2020. So you can elect. There is an election you can make to defer it for 1 year. So you'd have to file that election with your next year's tax return. But if you do not elect, then it is deemed to be income in your 2020, and you will have to either adjust your 2020 return, or the CRA might adjust it for you. So
yes, exactly.
I guess I want to touch base because I was in to see my dry cleaner today, which isn't a regular occurrence. I only wear a tie for Greg once a week now, so my dry cleaning bill is far lower. But my dry cleaner, was one of those ones that was specifically excluded from this Ontario Small Business Grant Program. He's been reapplying, trying to find a category that might fit him. It seems that they're being a bit more flexible. He reapplied as under services, I think, and they've emailed back and asked a few questions. So it seems to me, maybe Greg and then Brad, that they're trying to be a bit more flexible because they've only used about a 2/3 of that program that was designated for businesses that were shut down by the province to get that $10,000 loan, when many businesses who were not obligated to shut down were effectively shut down for all intents and purposes during that lockdown period. Greg, that's what we've been hearing. Have you been hearing the same thing, that people are that they're trying to be more flexible in the decision making?
Well, I think what's interesting is I've talked to a couple who have actually put it in and it hasn't kicked them out right away. So it hasn't, even though they've answered the questions sincerely honest, and they probably, based on the original criteria, they should have been, bumped out or not accepted. It has been accepted. So obviously they're trying to take a view of, let's take these applications and let's have a look at the circumstances and review them before we deny or accept. So the problem is, I think, with the province especially, is having the horsepower of the human resources behind it to deal with all the applications. And that's going to be a bit of a nightmare for them. I think they'd have been smarter to adjust the regulatory requirements and let them go through the system and qualify, and then the checks can be sent out. So
yeah. What are you hearing, Brad? I don't know if you guys are getting a lot of questions on that particular program.
We've had a few, and most of it is just, from, businesses who straightforward, qualified for it. So haven't heard too many of our clients who have complained about not getting it. A couple with, what category should we, fall under. But of the ones that, didn't fit that, box that was originally there, they've all gotten it. So it's been a fairly, good news story for us here at our office with this program, at least. And the big thing is, if you look at the eligibility, it's fairly broad, right? Like, you might not fit into one of their, boxes that they have you click. But, as long as you were, required to close or restrict your services and you, had less than, 100 employees and you had a revenue dip of some sort, then, you should be able to apply for something, right? So, like I said, we've had a couple that didn't fit the box. They, applied, asked a couple questions and ended up getting it. So.
Yeah, and I think what they're finding, Greg, is that because I think that's true, even for restaurants and others that would have been eligible. They're finding some of those businesses like dry cleaners, which they explicitly excluded, where I think they're trying to be more permissive in terms of approving, because the dry cleaner, he said, well, my business is down 85% because no one's going to work. And so I got no one coming in. They might as well have told them to shut down. And I think they're kind of understanding that.
And one of the problems that's still happening, that the government hasn't been able to overcome, is the employee count in an enterprise. So you might have 3 independent or 4 or 5 independent businesses operating under one single enterprise, and they're being excluded because the employee count that the province wants to use is the combined of the entire enterprise. And in spite of the fact that, the 3, 4, or 5 subsets of the enterprise might have their own CRA numbers and operate and file as an independent small business, from the province's perspective, they don't accept that. And I think that's been a huge challenge, because most of them are small businesses, even though they might have an enterprise, or there might be an enterprise or single owner corporation over top of them. they're still struggling individually as little businesses, because the enterprise has no other function than to manage and coordinate the effectiveness of the small businesses underneath. So I
Have you
think
run it?
they need to address that, because that's going to be a problem for a lot of people.
You've been hearing anything around that, Brad?
No, I haven't.
I think some of the examples in that front would be, as an example, a restaurant, that may have 5 little small restaurants, but has a holding company or an enterprise that's doing some of the admin part for all of them. So if you aggregate all the employees, they might have 150 employees, most of whom, by the way, would be part-time. But that excludes them out from that, even though each of the operations it is a standalone operation. So we've been hearing some of those where it's entirely, and part of this, as you say, is trying to design a program on the, I wouldn't say on the back of an envelope, but pretty quickly. Some of these things weren't sort of captured. You mentioned when we first came on, Brad, and I sort of lost the string on this. You said there was an announcement around interest. Maybe we can touch on that. Which program is that associated to?
So this is it was announced for personal tax. So it was just basically the CRA has come out and said, if you meet these certain criteria, then you actually don't have to pay your balance until April of 2022. And they won't charge you any interest. So fairly simple criteria. You have to file your 2020 tax return, obviously. You had to receive at least one COVID benefit, and it doesn't say, how much of the COVID benefit. You just have to have one payment. So whether it be CERB, CRB, EI, something along those lines. So as long as you have one COVID benefit, you file your 2020 return, and your taxable income is less than 75,000. You don't have to pay your balance until April of 2022, and the CRA will not charge you a cent in interest.
Well, that's good for those that fall into that category, because if cash flow is a problem now, it gives you basically 14 months to kind of get yourself back up and running. Yeah. Okay, I hadn't heard that one actually, but that's important for a lot of the workers in our businesses. Greg, there was a couple of, one of the other things that we're calling on, and we always talk about it because it's important for anyone that's going to listen into this later on. The program that the province is running around up to $1,000 grant, or as a repayable expenses for PPE, is going to be incredibly important over the next number of months. Particularly as the most important thing that any business can do is to get their own staff, certainly, if not their customers, into surgical or medical grade masks. And so people getting access to with additional costs around some PPE, that there is this program that I think it's the provincial program. Maybe we should touch on that, just of how that works, the mechanics of that. So if people are having additional expenses or expenditures as they start to reopen, that program is available. Brad?
So yeah, it's one that we actually haven't had any requests from any of our clients. I've read up on it. So basically, on the eligibility, I think it's, you have to have a few employees. I think they capped it under 20 or something like that. And then there's, certain sectors you have to be in. So if you fall into the sector and you have, I think it's between 2 and 20 employees or something like that, then you'll get a one-time grant of up to $1,000. So,
yeah, Greg, you're more familiar with that one.
Yeah, it's exclusive to retail, accommodations, hospitality type businesses, actually repair and maintenance as well. So if you're, a plumbing service or heating service, that would work. Laundry services and personal services like massage therapy, that kind of thing. Gyms and yoga studios are also eligible for that grant. And anything in the arts and entertainment and recreation, of course, are also eligible to it. You got to be under 20 employees, so you got to be 19 or less. You'll get a up to $1,000 grant for your PPE. This is so critically important, and I think it's $1,000. You got to identify the PPE. It's got to be approved, certified type of reasonings for doing it, but it can be just about anything from plexiglass shields to like for wearing or for putting on your counter. It can be masks, it can be gloves, it can be gowns, it can be just about anything that would qualify as personal protective equipment for viral contamination. I think every single small business, if you're under 20 employees, you have to apply for that grant, because as we've been saying all along, making sure your employees are masked up and making sure your employees are following the rules of the day is essential to give Ian and I and Art, who's on this call as well, and all of us for that matter, the opportunity to stand up to government and say there's no reason to close down the workplace, because the workplace is not the problem of transmission. If we do everything we possibly can, we can curb that transmission in the workplace, which then gives the government no reason to shut it down. And I think that's what people, especially business owners, we need to know that, and you need to emphasize that with your staff, that appropriately wearing your PPE, masking up as best as possible. We recommend a minimum of 3 layers, but you should have a medical grade surgical mask on even under that 3-layer mask to make sure that you are protected, but more importantly, that you're protecting the people that come in your store.
Well, and maybe Greg, you had some stats there. I was going to get them mix them up a little bit, but I think this is important because there is money and a grant that can reimburse you. But
yep.
A 2-ply cloth mask versus a 3-ply versus a surgical mask is a huge difference. And every little bit we can do for ourselves, our employees, and hopefully our customers will, contain the spread, which is the most important thing to staying open and reopening more fully until all the vaccinations are done. So maybe kind of walk through that, because I think it's a pretty stark reminder that surgical mask by itself makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because you and I both know they're extremely light and weight, and they feel like even when you put them on, they don't feel that constricted or restrictive at all, but they're amazingly efficient. So most people in the very beginning were wearing a single layer cloth mask, or a lot of people bought the branded, collar things that go around. They just pull them up over their nose and mouth. Those actually have an efficiency rating of about 2%. So in essence, you're not wearing a mask when you have one of those on. If you get into a 3-layer mask, which a lot of the branded ones that you see out there that are fairly expensive to buy online, but they're generally 3 layers of material, and the middle has a fabric in there that is a specially woven fabric or a tighter woven fabric to give you a little bit of extra support. But even those are only 38% efficient. So you're still on the wrong side of protection if you're even wearing a 3-ply traditional mask that we see. However, that single layer blue, we all see them, blue medical grade surgical type mask has a 55% efficiency rating. And, a lot of people talk about masks and that, we don't need to wear them. They're not important. It's not. The medical community for decades and decades, since the beginning, have been wearing masks, and they're wearing masks for a particular reason. That's to make sure that they don't transmit or that they don't receive any bacteria or viruses that in the environment that they're working in. So there's no question about it. The scientific community has been well aware for many, 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 many decades that mask wearing can protect you and can protect others that you come into contact with. But the important factor is making sure that you're wearing the type of mask that can give you the most protection or give others the most protection from you. And so that's why Ian and I are very strong on this and saying, you know, even if you've got a 3-ply mask, both he and I will wear a surgical medical grade mask underneath our 3-ply mask because maybe it's logoed up and we want to be able to display the logo, and that's great. But wearing that surgical mask underneath it can give you up to 80% protection. And that's really what we need to do. And I know it becomes tough when if you're stocking shelves at a grocery store or you're working hard around the workplace. I know it can be kind of difficult and take those breaks often, but this is so very important for the economy and of our region to make sure that we do all the things we can to open up more broadly until such time as we get herd immunity through vaccination. And that's a few months away at least.
Yeah.
So we just need you to bear down. You know, we're on the home stretch. It's where the jockey on the horse starts really pushing the horse because this is the last stretch and we need to get there as best we possibly can.
So that's the long answer to why people should care about why it's important to care about that PPE program. Listen, Brad, are there any other programs you want to highlight? You know, the rent program has become a lot easier for people now that it's the business owner applying. Are there any tricks of the trade there? Any things around the rent program? Because that's the other one along with wage subsidy, which is really important for small and medium-sized business right now.
So yeah, if you've been applying for the wage subsidy, you're basically eligible for the rent subsidy. It's almost the exactly same calculation. There is one little component that if you didn't get the wage subsidy, you could still get part of a rent subsidy, and that's for the lockdown component. So there is a lockdown part of the subsidy. So if you were required to be locked down from December 26th till whatever it was in February, then you would get that supplement even if you didn't get the rest of the rent subsidy. So just to be aware that that is out there. The other thing too is that it's not just rent. If you are required to pay for, you know, your utilities and stuff like that, then you can also claim a portion of that in that subsidy calculation. So don't just think it's your rent, it's anything related to that. And also if you say, you know, have a holding company and you use the holding company and you own the building and you rent it out to your operating company can't claim the rent subsidy, but your holding company can claim it on some of the expenses it pays. So just know that, you know, because one company can't claim it doesn't mean that you're all automatically out of it.
Okay, and I guess that's I'll broaden that out. Is if for people that will listen into this, and we've had this a number of times in these before, Greg, and a number of our experts say, if you're turned down the first time, it doesn't mean you shouldn't reapply. Many of these programs, reapplying, giving more information, always being accurate, of course, or truthful, but you know, reapplying and giving more information and clarifying for the various organizations is pretty important, because, you know, we've had many examples of folks that are turned down the first or second time, but then get it on a third or fourth. So persistence is pretty important, and cash flow is going to be really important over this next sort of March, April, May, June period while we're ramping up vaccines and hopefully getting the economy more open. So good advice from Brad. I don't think we have any more questions. Is there anything else, Greg, that we should highlight? We've talked about SEBA, we've talked about SUS, we've talked about the wage subsidy, we've talked about rent. Are there any other things that we should cover off today?
I think you know, aside from what you're saying, keep applying. We got to keep hearing too. And so, you know, anybody who listens to this who is having trouble, struggling getting some of the programs, they need to let us know, and that's to give us an email back to our offices or whatever the case may be, or give us a phone call. We need to clearly understand what your problem is so that we can go to bat for you at the federal government, see if little tweaks. Sometimes it's a hiccup of some sort that just needs to be kind of patted on the back, and things can happen for you. Other things are maybe a little bit more difficult, but don't hesitate to let us know what your problem is, so that we can go to bat for you and try and help get some of the funding. It is, and I think the government clearly understands, and it's really important that businesses exit this part of the pandemic as healthy as possible, even though nobody's really healthy. But they know that business needs a clear foundation to be able to take advantage of what happens once there is herd immunity through vaccination. So everybody's trying to do their best. We're not going to be able to fill everybody's need or want, but we'll certainly work hard to try and help as best we can.
Okay, Brad, I want to thank you. We'll leave it there for today. We will be back next Thursday. We'll collect questions and hopefully there'll be, I'm sure there'll be some new information that will come up between now and then. Brad, thank you to you. I know it's a busy time with your firm, a big supporter of our chamber and the Cambridge Chamber. So we appreciate you taking time out of your schedule today to give us some of your advice. And we do appreciate that contribution to today's session.
Yeah, not a problem. The one thing I just want to mention before I left, just because I heard it the other day, and it has to do more on the personal side, is that the people that repaid their CERB because they thought that they weren't qualified, they got that, one of those letters that were sent out. You can actually request that the government reissue it to you if you met that $5,000 gross. So if you repaid it, they will pay it back to you. You have to just ask them for it.
Wow.
So
that would qualify as man bites dog, that the government just sends you. I might try it. I'm just kidding. But if you have paid it back and you got one of those letters, be in touch with CRA and they will send you a check back.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, thanks so much, Brad, and to Dana for arranging all this. This will be posted on our chambercheck.ca and our chamber websites. Always good information. Greg, thanks for joining us. To Art, and we will be back a week from now, same bat channel, same bat time with Ask the Expert. Thanks.